Katie Morrison stood at the observation deck window and watched the transport ship dock with the station. She had been working on the Galactic Exchange Station for 3 months now, and she still got nervous before meeting new alien species. Her job title was Cultural Liaison, which meant she helped aliens understand humans and helped humans understand aliens. It sounded simple on paper, but in reality, it was complicated and sometimes scary. The station was huge, bigger than any city Katie had seen on Earth. It floated in space between several star systems, a neutral meeting ground where hundreds of different species came to trade, talk, and learn about each other. Katie had met bird-like creatures who sang instead of talked, blob-like beings who communicated through color changes, and insect species that moved in perfect coordination like a hive mind. Each one had been strange and wonderful in their own way, but the Vrexians were different. Katie had read their file 3 times, and each time her stomach had twisted with worry. They were predators, apex predators from a world where everything wanted to kill everything else. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur with glowing patterns on their skin. They had fangs as long as her fingers and claws that could tear through metal. Every picture she had seen made them look like monsters from horror movies. The transport ship finished docking. Katie straightened her uniform and walked toward the arrival bay. Captain Ryan Hayes had asked her personally to handle this assignment. The Vrexians had requested a human liaison specifically, though no one knew why. Katie suspected it was because humans had a reputation for not backing down from danger. She hoped that reputation would not get her killed. The bay doors opened with a hiss of air. 4 tall figures walked through, followed by 2 even larger ones. Katie forced herself to stand still and not step back. The Vrexians moved like liquid shadows, their muscles rippling under their fur with each step. The patterns on their skin glowed with blue and green light, pulsing in rhythm with their breathing. Their eyes were golden and bright, tracking every movement in the room. Ambassador Krell, the leader of the group, approached her first. He was massive, his fur streaked with silver and his patterns dimmed with age. He looked down at Katie from his full height and showed his teeth in what she hoped was a smile. "Greetings, human Katie Morrison," he said through the translator device on his chest. His real voice was a deep rumble that she felt in her bones. "I am Ambassador Krell. These are my companions." Katie had prepared a formal greeting speech, but the words died in her throat when she looked at the 4 smaller Vrexians. Smaller was relative. They were still over 7 feet tall and built like athletes. But their patterns glowed much brighter than the adults, and they looked at her with something that seemed like curiosity mixed with fear. "These are our young ones," Krell continued, gesturing to the 4. "Zek, Vera, Thon, and Kira. They are here for their trial period, to learn about other species before they become adults. You will be their teacher." Katie found her voice. "Welcome to the station, Ambassador. I'm honored to work with you and your young ones." She used the term young ones because she had learned that calling them children was insulting to Vrexians. They were adolescents, not babies. The 4 young Vrexians stared at her without blinking. Their patterns flickered and changed colors rapidly. Katie wondered what that meant. She made a mental note to research Vrexian body language more thoroughly tonight. The first week went smoothly, or so Katie thought. She showed the Vrexians around the station, introduced them to other species, and started teaching them about human culture. The young ones were quiet but attentive. They listened to everything she said and asked smart questions. They seemed genuinely interested in learning, but other people on the station started to notice something strange. Whenever Katie walked down a corridor, the 4 young Vrexians would appear behind her. They did not walk beside her or in front of her. They followed at a distance of about 10 feet, moving silently despite their size. When Katie stopped, they stopped. When she turned a corner, they turned the same corner. At first, Katie thought it was coincidence. The station was big, but not infinite. Of course, they would run into each other sometimes. But then Lieutenant Greg Palmer from security pulled her aside. "Katie, we need to talk about your Vrexians," he said, his face serious. "What about them?" Katie asked. "They're following you, everywhere. We've been tracking it on the security cameras. Every time you leave your quarters, all 4 of them show up within 2 minutes and follow you around the station." Katie felt a chill run down her spine. "Are they dangerous? Should I be worried?" Greg shook his head. "We don't know. They're not doing anything aggressive. They just watch you. But 3 other species have filed complaints. They say the Vrexians are exhibiting stalking behavior, and it's making everyone nervous." Katie thought about this. She had not noticed them following her, which said something about how quietly they moved. But if they had wanted to hurt her, they could have done it a dozen times already. "Let me handle it," she told Greg. "I'll talk to Ambassador Krell." But before she could arrange a meeting with Krell, something happened that made everything more complicated. Katie was in the classroom section of the station, teaching a session about human literature. The 4 young Vrexians sat in chairs that were too small for them, their glowing patterns dim with concentration as they listened to her explain poetry. She read them a poem by Robert Frost about 2 roads in a yellow wood. When she finished, Vera, the only female in the group, raised her clawed hand. "Teacher Katie," Vera said through her translator. Her voice was higher than the male's, almost musical. "This human in the poem chooses the road less traveled." "Why, the other road is safer." Katie smiled. This was why she loved her job. Because sometimes the harder path teaches us more. Sometimes we grow stronger by facing challenges instead of avoiding them. Vera's patterns pulsed bright green. "This is very Vrexian," she said. "We believe the same thing. The hunt that challenges us makes us worthy." The class went well. Katie felt proud of how much the young Vrexians were learning. But when the session ended and she packed up her materials, she noticed something odd. The 4 young ones did not leave. They sat in their chairs and watched her with those intense golden eyes. "Class is over," Katie said gently. "You can go back to your quarters." "We know, Teacher Katie," Zek said. He was the largest of the 4 with patterns that swirled in complex spirals. "We will leave when you leave," Katie paused. "Why?" The 4 Vrexians exchanged glances. Their patterns flickered rapidly like they were having a conversation she could not hear. Finally, Thon spoke. He was the quietest of the group, thoughtful and careful with his words. "It would be disrespectful to leave first," he said simply. Katie wanted to ask more questions, but her stomach growled loudly. She had skipped breakfast and it was already past lunchtime. "All right," she said. "I'm going to the cafeteria to eat. You're welcome to come if you're hungry." The 4 young Vrexians stood up immediately. Their patterns flared bright with what looked like relief or happiness. They followed her out of the classroom, maintaining that same 10-foot distance. As Katie walked through the station corridors toward the cafeteria, she became aware of how many eyes were watching them. Aliens of every species stopped what they were doing to stare at the human woman being followed by 4 massive predators. Some moved quickly out of the way. Others whispered to each other in languages her translator did not pick up. Katie kept walking. She had learned in her 3 months on the station that showing fear was the worst thing you could do. Predator species could smell fear, sometimes literally, so she walked with her head up and her shoulders back, like she had every right to be there. Like having 4 Vrexian shadows was the most normal thing in the world. The cafeteria doors slid open. Katie stepped inside, not knowing that her lunch break was about to change everything. The cafeteria was packed with aliens from at least 20 different species. The noise was incredible, a mix of clicks, whistles, hums, and sounds that human ears were not designed to hear properly. The translator in Katie's ear did its best to sort through the chaos, but mostly it just created a background buzz of half-translated conversations. Katie grabbed a tray from the stack near the entrance. She moved through the food line, selecting items that looked familiar, a pasta dish with vegetables, some bread, and a piece of fruit that was probably genetically modified but tasted like an apple. She paid using her station credit chip and looked around for an empty table. The viewing section near the windows was less crowded. Katie headed that way, glad for the chance to eat while looking at the stars. Space never got old, no matter how many times she saw it. The endless black dotted with points of light reminded her that she was living a dream most humans never got to experience. She sat down and placed her tray on the table. Behind her, she heard gasps and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. Katie turned around and her heart nearly stopped. All 4 Vrexian young ones had followed her into the cafeteria. They had grabbed trays but not food. They sat down at the tables surrounding hers, forming a loose circle with her at the center. And they were staring at her, not with anger or hunger, but with complete and total focus. Their golden eyes tracked every tiny movement she made. The cafeteria had gone almost silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Aliens from species that usually ignored each other were looking at the same thing, at Katie and her circle of predators. She saw security officers standing up from their tables, hands moving toward their communication devices. Sam Chen, the head of cafeteria security, was walking toward her with his hand on his stun weapon. His face was calm, but Katie could see the tension in his shoulders. Two other officers followed him, flanking wide like they expected trouble. Katie's mind raced. What were the Vrexians doing? They had not threatened her. They had not even spoken. They just sat there with empty trays watching her eat lunch. But she could feel the fear in the room like a physical thing. Other aliens were moving away, putting distance between themselves and the Vrexians. Some species had already left the cafeteria entirely. She looked at the four young ones again. Their patterns were pulsing rapidly, shifting through colors faster than she had seen before. Zek's spirals spun like whirlpools. Vara's geometric shapes flickered and jumped. Thon's wave patterns crashed over each other. Kira's starburst designs exploded and reformed over and over. Katie had studied alien body language as part of her training. Rapid pattern changes in bioluminescent species usually meant stress or strong emotion. The Vrexians were not calm. They were anxious, maybe even afraid. But afraid of what? They were the predators here. They could tear apart everyone in this cafeteria if they wanted to, unless they were afraid of her. The thought seemed crazy, but Katie could not shake it. They were not looking at her like she was prey. They were looking at her like she was something important, something they needed to please or impress. Their body language was not aggressive. It was submissive, waiting, hopeful. Sam Chen was 10 feet away now, his hand tight on his weapon. Katie made a decision. She held up her hand in a stop gesture. Sam froze, his eyes questioning. Katie shook her head slightly and mouthed the words, "It's okay." Sam did not look convinced, but he stopped approaching. He stayed where he was, ready to move if things went wrong. Katie turned back to her tray. Her pasta was getting cold. She picked up her fork, aware that every eye in the cafeteria was watching her. She speared a piece of pasta, brought it to her mouth, and took a bite. She chewed slowly, tasting nothing because her nerves were too tight. She swallowed. The change in the Vrexians was instant and dramatic. All four of them relaxed like someone had cut strings holding them tight. Their patterns slowed to a steady, gentle glow. Zek's spirals moved in slow, lazy circles. Vara's shapes settled into stable triangles and squares. Thon's waves became calm ripples. Kira's stars twinkled softly instead of exploding. Without a word, all four young Vrexians stood up. They walked to the food dispensers, moving with purpose now instead of hesitation. They selected their meals, mostly raw proteins and thick nutrient pastes that smelled like iron and earth. They returned to their tables and sat back down, and then they started eating. Not frantically or aggressively, but normally, like this was the most natural thing in the world. They ate and occasionally glanced at Katie with what she was starting to recognize as respect or maybe gratitude. The cafeteria slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed, though quieter and more careful than before. Aliens who had moved away stayed where they were, but they stopped looking so panicked. Sam Chen stood down his security team, though he kept watching the Vrexians with suspicious eyes. Katie finished her meal in a daze. She had no idea what had just happened, but she knew it was important. The young Vrexians had been waiting for something, and her eating had given them permission to eat too. But why? What kind of culture created that behavior? She stood up with her empty tray. The four Vrexians immediately stood up as well, their own trays still half full. Katie paused and they paused. She took a step and they took a step. She realized they were going to follow her again, and this time everyone in the cafeteria would see it happen. "Finish your food first," Katie said, trying to sound firm but kind. "I'll wait." The Vrexians looked at each other. Their patterns flickered with confusion. Finally Vera spoke, her musical voice carrying across the quiet cafeteria. "Teacher Katie, we cannot eat after you have finished. It would be wrong." Katie blinked. "What do you mean, wrong?" "Disrespectful," Zek added, his deep voice rumbling. "Shameful. We wait for the leader to eat first. We finish only when the leader finishes or gives permission to continue." Leader. The word hung in the air between them. Katie was not their leader. She was their teacher, their liaison, their guide maybe, but not their leader. Leaders commanded. Leaders gave orders. Katie just tried to help people understand each other, but the way the four young Vrexians looked at her said otherwise. To them, she was a leader. She was their leader, and that meant something in their culture that Katie did not fully understand yet. "All right," Katie said slowly. I give you permission to finish your meals. Take your time. I'll meet you outside in 15 minutes. The relief on their faces, or what passed for faces under all that fur and those sharp features, was obvious. They sat back down and resumed eating, their patterns glowing with contentment. Katie left the cafeteria with her mind spinning. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. This was more than just a cultural difference. This was something deep, something instinctive in the Vrexians that treated her as an authority figure beyond her actual role. She went straight to her quarters and pulled up every file she had on Vrexian culture. She read for 30 minutes, skipping past the basic information she already knew, and diving into the sections about social structure and hierarchy. Vrexians were pack hunters. They lived in groups with strict dominance structures. The pack leader ate first always to prove the food was safe and to show their position at the top. Young Vrexians learned this from birth. To eat before the leader was to challenge them, to declare yourself worthy of leading. It was the ultimate insult, the beginning of a fight that usually ended in death or exile. But Katie was not Vrexian. She was human. The rules should not apply to her, should they? She kept reading and found something that made her blood run cold. Vrexians did not limit their pack instincts to their own species. They recognized dominance hierarchies across species lines. They could sense, through a combination of pheromones and body language and other cues humans did not fully understand, who the apex predators were in any environment, and they responded to those apex predators with the same instincts they showed to their own pack leaders. Katie sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. The Vrexians thought she was an apex predator. They thought humans were apex predators. That was why they followed her. That was why they waited for her to eat. That was why their patterns showed submission and respect instead of aggression. But humans were not the biggest or strongest species on the station. They were not the fastest or the most well-armed. They did not have claws or fangs or natural weapons. How could the Vrexians possibly think humans were apex predators? Katie looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her computer. She saw a woman of average height, average build, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She saw nothing special, nothing that screamed predator. But then she thought about how she moved through the station. She walked without hesitation. She met the eyes of aliens that most humans avoided looking at. She entered rooms full of predators and prey alike without showing fear. She positioned herself at tables and in conversations like she belonged there, like she had every right to be treated as an equal or even a superior. Maybe that was what the Vrexians saw. Not size or strength, but confidence. The absolute assumption that she was safe, that she was in control, that nothing could touch her. It was a lie, of course. Katie was terrified half the time. But she had learned to hide that fear, to fake confidence until it became real. And apparently, that was enough to convince 4 young Vrexians that she was their pack leader. Katie requested an emergency meeting with Ambassador Krell. She sent the request as high priority and marked it urgent. Within an hour, she received a response. Krell would meet with her in the diplomatic conference room at 6 in the evening. He also granted her request to bring Dr. Lisa Park, the station's xenobiologist, and Commander Ben Tucker from security. Katie spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. She made notes, organized her thoughts, and tried to figure out how to explain the situation without sounding crazy or paranoid. The 4 young Vrexians thought she was their pack leader because she ate first in the cafeteria. Written down like that, it sounded absurd. But Katie knew what she had seen in their eyes, in their patterns, in the way they moved around her. At 6 o'clock sharp, Katie entered the conference room. Dr. Park was already there, a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. Commander Tucker arrived right behind Katie, tall and muscular with the careful movements of someone trained for combat. Ambassador Krell was waiting at the head of the table with one of his adult companions, a Vrexian named Drath who served as his second-in-command. Everyone sat down. The conference room was designed for multiple species, with chairs that adjusted to different body sizes and shapes. Even so, the 2 Vrexians dominated the space with their sheer size and presence. Their patterns glowed softly in the dimmed lighting, swirling in colors Katie was learning to read like facial expressions. Katie decided to speak first. She was the one who called this meeting. She owed it to everyone to be direct. Ambassador Krell, we need to talk about your young ones and their behavior around me. Other species on the station are getting worried. They say the Vrexians are following me, watching me, and they think it might be dangerous. Krell's patterns shifted to a dark blue that Katie had not seen before. His companion Drath leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Krell said, "What happened today in the cafeteria?" Katie blinked. How did he already know about that? The 4 young ones followed me to lunch. They got trays but no food. They sat around me and watched me eat. They would not touch their own food until after I started eating mine. When I asked them why, they said it would be disrespectful to eat before the leader. Drath made a sound that the translator could not interpret, something between a growl and a sigh. His patterns flared bright red for just a second before fading back to their normal colors. Krell closed his eyes. His patterns dimmed almost to nothing. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like shame. "I owe you an apology, Katie Morrison. I owe your entire species an apology. We have made a terrible mistake, and that mistake has put our young ones in a very difficult position." Dr. Park leaned forward, her scientific curiosity clearly activated. "What kind of mistake, Ambassador?" "A translation error," Krell said. "When we requested a cultural liaison, we used our word, Kreshtar. Our translators rendered this into your language as cultural liaison. But Kreshtar does not mean the same thing. In our tongue, it means something closer to pack leader, or alpha guide, or the one who teaches young ones their place in the hierarchy." Katie felt her stomach drop. She had been right. The Vrexians did think she was their pack leader, but it was worse than she thought. It was not just instinct. It was a deliberate assignment, a role they believed she had accepted. "When you agreed to teach our young ones," Krell continued, "they interpreted this as you adopting them into your pack. In Vrexian culture, this is a sacred bond. The pack leader is responsible for the young ones, and the young ones owe the pack leader absolute loyalty and respect." Commander Tucker spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "With respect, Ambassador, that explains the following behavior. But why the cafeteria incident? Why refuse to eat until Katie ate first?" Drath answered this time, his rumbling voice filled with obvious distress. "Because that is our most sacred rule. You never eat before the pack leader. Never. To do so is to challenge their authority, to declare yourself worthy of leading. It is how coups happen. It is how blood feuds start. Our young ones have been taught this rule since they were cubs barely able to walk. But I'm not Vrexian," Katie said. "I'm human. Those rules should not apply to me." Krell's patterns pulsed with something that looked like sadness. "Our young ones do not see species. They see hierarchy. They see predators and prey, leaders and followers, and they have identified you as an apex predator, as someone worthy of leading them." Dr. Park pulled out her tablet and started taking notes. "How do they identify apex predators across species lines? What cues are they reading?" "Many things," Krell said. "Pheromones, though humans sense, are different from ours and harder to read. Body language, the way you move and hold yourself. Eye contact, especially direct eye contact with other predators. Voice tone, even through translator. But most importantly, confidence. The absolute certainty that you belong at the top of every social structure. Humans have that," Drath added. "All of you have it. We have been watching your species since first contact. You walk into rooms full of beings that could kill you without effort, and you act like you own the space. You make eye contact with species that most creatures avoid looking at. You speak with authority even when you have no real power. It is remarkable and terrifying in equal measure." Katie thought about this. She had never considered that her normal behavior might seem predatory to other species. She just acted like a human, like any human. But maybe that was the point. Maybe humans as a species carried themselves like apex predators even when they were not. "So what do we do now?" Commander Tucker asked. "We cannot have 4 Vrexian young ones treating a human civilian as their pack leader. It is a security risk and a diplomatic nightmare." Krell and Drath exchanged glances. Their patterns flickered rapidly, like they were having a silent conversation. Finally, Krell spoke. "There are 3 options. First, we could tell the young ones the truth that this was a mistake, that Katie Morrison is not their pack leader, but this would devastate them. They have already bonded with her. To break that bond would bring them shame and dishonor. They might never recover psychologically." "Second option?" Katie asked, her heart heavy at the thought of hurting the 4 young Vrexians who had done nothing wrong. "We could assign them to a different liaison from a different species, someone who would not trigger their pack instincts so strongly. But this also brings shame. It would mean they failed their trial period, that they could not adapt to alien cultures. They would return home as failures. Dr. Park looked up from her notes. And the third option? You embrace the role, Krell said, looking directly at Katie. You become their pack leader in truth, not just in their minds. You guide them, teach them, help them complete their trial period. When they return home, they carry honor instead of shame. But this would require work from you. You would need to learn our ways, understand our pack dynamics, and accept responsibilities that go beyond your job description. Katie sat back in her chair. 3 months ago, she had been a graduate student studying xenobiology on Earth. She had applied to the exchange station program on a whim, never expecting to get accepted. Now she was being asked to become a pack leader for alien predators that could tear her apart if she made a mistake. What exactly would being their pack leader mean? She asked. What would I have to do? Krell's patterns shifted to a warm amber color. You would eat first, always in their presence. This they already know. You would give them guidance and discipline when needed. You would protect them from threats they cannot handle themselves. You would teach them how to navigate social situations with other species. You would be responsible for their safety and their honor. And what do they owe me in return? Everything, Drath said simply. Loyalty, obedience, protection, and respect. They would answer your call for the rest of their lives if you needed them. They would defend your honor as they would their own family. The bond between pack leader and pack member is sacred to us. It is not given lightly and it is never broken. Katie looked at Dr. Park and Commander Tucker. Park was watching her with scientific fascination, like Katie was an experiment in real time. Tucker's face was neutral, but she could see approval in his eyes. He understood what she was being asked to do, and he thought she could handle it. I need to talk to them, Katie said. The 4 young ones. Before I decide anything, I need to hear from them directly. Krell's patterns flared bright with respect. A wise decision, pack leader. Katie noticed he had already started calling her that. Maybe in his mind she had already accepted. Maybe the decision had been made the moment she took that first bite of pasta in the cafeteria, while 4 young Vrexians watched and waited. The meeting ended. Katie went straight to the quarters assigned to the young Vrexians. She pressed the door chime and waited. The door opened immediately like they had been waiting for her. All 4 of them stood inside, their patterns dim with anxiety. Teacher Katie, Zek said. We heard you met with Ambassador Krell. Are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? Katie stepped inside and the door closed behind her. The room was sparse, designed for beings who did not need much comfort. Katie looked at the 4 young Vrexians sitting before her. Their patterns pulsed with nervous energy, cycling through colors she was beginning to understand. Blue for worry, green for hope, amber for respect. They looked at her with those golden eyes that saw things humans could not see, sensed things humans could not sense. Tell me what you think I am to you, Katie said, in your own words without translators making things nice. I want the truth, Vera spoke first. Her patterns settled into a steady green with hints of gold. You are our pack leader. You guide us, teach us, show us how to survive in this strange place. We follow you because you are worthy to lead. Why am I worthy? Katie asked. I am not the biggest or strongest. I have no claws or fangs. I cannot fight like you can. What makes you think I can lead you? Thon leaned forward, his wave patterns moving in slow, thoughtful ripples. Size and strength do not make a leader. Wisdom makes a leader. Confidence makes a leader. You walk through this station like you own it. You look predators in the eye without fear. You speak with authority to beings that could destroy you. That is what makes a leader. Kira, who had been quiet until now, added, We have been taught since we were small cubs to recognize true predators, not by their teeth or claws, but by their spirit. Humans have the spirit of apex predators. You do not run. You do not hide. You stand your ground even when you should be afraid. That is power greater than any muscle. Zek's spiraling patterns moved faster. When we first saw you, we were terrified. We thought humans would see us as monsters, as things to be feared and avoided. But you looked at us and you smiled. You welcomed us. You treated us with respect instead of fear. That is when we knew. You were not afraid because you had no reason to be afraid. Apex predators do not fear other predators. They acknowledge them as equals or allies. Katie felt something shift in her chest. She had been so focused on the technical aspects of being a pack leader that she had missed the emotional reality. These 4 young Vrexians were far from home, surrounded by aliens who feared them, trying to prove themselves worthy in a trial that could make or break their futures, and they had found in her something they desperately needed, someone who treated them like people instead of monsters. "I'm not Vrexian," Katie said softly. "I cannot teach you the ways of your people. I do not know your hunting songs or your honor codes. I can only teach you what I know as a human." "That is exactly what we need," Vara said. "We know how to be Vrexian. We need to learn how to live with species that are not like us. We need to learn how to make others comfortable despite our appearance. We need to learn how to use our strength to help instead of intimidate. You can teach us these things because you already do them." Katie made her decision. She stood up and looked down at the 4 young Vrexians. "All right, I will be your pack leader, but on my terms. I will not treat you like mindless followers. I will teach you to think for yourselves, to make your own choices, to stand on your own 4 feet. I will guide you, but I will not control you. Can you accept that?" All 4 of them stood immediately. Their patterns flared bright with joy and relief. "Yes, pack leader," they said in unison. "And one more thing," Katie added. "This goes both ways. You will teach me about your culture, your traditions, your way of seeing the world. I want to learn from you as much as you learn from me." "Agreed." "Agreed," Zek said, and his spirals spun with happiness. Over the next few weeks, Katie fell into her new role. She learned quickly that being a pack leader was more complicated than she had imagined. It was not just about eating first or giving orders. It was about understanding each young Vrexian as an individual, recognizing their strengths and weaknesses, helping them grow in their own unique ways. Zek was the largest and strongest, but he was also the most insecure. He worried constantly about measuring up to his family's expectations. Katie taught him that strength was not just about physical power. She showed him how to use his size to make others feel safe instead of threatened. She had him help carry heavy equipment for smaller species, assist with repairs in tight spaces where his claws could grip what human hands could not. Soon other aliens started seeking Zek out when they needed help. His patterns glowed with pride each time. Vera was brilliant and curious, always asking questions about everything. But she struggled with patience. She wanted to understand everything immediately, and she got frustrated when learning took time. Katie taught her about delayed gratification, about the journey being as important as the destination. They spent hours in the station's library, researching different species and cultures. Vara learned to savor the process of discovery instead of just rushing to the conclusion. Thon was thoughtful and careful, the philosopher of the group. But his caution sometimes held him back from taking necessary risks. Katie encouraged him to step outside his comfort zone in small, safe ways. She had him lead discussions in their study groups, present findings to other species, even organize social events. Each success built his confidence. His wave patterns became bolder, more dynamic. Kira was the youngest and the wildest. Her starburst patterns exploded with energy that sometimes got her into trouble. She loved speed and excitement, but she needed to learn discipline. Katie channeled that energy into productive activities. She got Kira involved in the station's maintenance crews, where quick reflexes and high energy were assets. She also taught her about consequences, about thinking before acting. Slowly, Kira's explosive patterns became more controlled without losing their brightness. The 4 young Vrexians flourished under Katie's guidance. More importantly, they started teaching her in return. They shared their hunting songs, complex melodies that told stories of courage and honor. Katie learned that Vrexians valued loyalty above everything else, that they would die for their pack without hesitation. They taught her their honor codes, intricate rules about respect and hierarchy that had evolved over thousands of years. Katie learned when to make direct eye contact and when to look away, how to read pattern changes, what gestures meant respect versus challenge. They showed her their combat forms, not to fight, but to understand. Vrexian fighting was like a dance, all flowing movements in perfect balance. Katie could not replicate their moves with her human body, but watching them helped her understand how they thought, how they moved through space. Other species on the station started noticing the changes. The 4 young Vrexians who had once been feared were now seen as helpers and protectors. They broke up fights between drunk aliens in the entertainment district, using intimidation and surprising gentleness to separate combatants without hurting anyone. They escorted smaller species through the dangerous lower levels where pirates and criminals sometimes lurked. They even started a youth program, teaching young aliens from other species about cooperation and respect. And always in the cafeteria, they maintained their ritual. They would sit near Katie and wait. They would not touch their food until she had taken her first bite. It became a symbol that other species recognized and respected. Some species even started adopting similar practices, waiting for their own mentors or leaders to eat first as a sign of respect. Katie felt herself changing too. She walked taller now, spoke with more confidence. She made decisions faster and trusted her instincts more. She realized that the young Vrexians had given her something precious, belief in herself as a leader. They looked at her and saw someone worth following. That belief had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. She was becoming the leader they thought she was. One evening, about 6 weeks after the cafeteria incident, Katie was in her quarters reading reports when her door chimed. She opened it to find Vera standing there alone, her patterns dim and uncertain. "Teacher Katie," Vera said quietly. "May I speak with you?" "Private conversation, just us." "Of course," Katie said, stepping aside to let her in. "What is wrong?" Vera settled onto the floor, her large body folding with surprising grace. "I have been thinking about going home. Our trial period will end soon. We will return to our world and become adults. But I am afraid." Katie sat down in her chair facing Vera. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that what we learned here will not matter there. Afraid that we will go back to being just another pack member, following orders, never thinking for ourselves. You taught us to question, to challenge, to grow. But Vrexian society does not always value those things. They value obedience and tradition." Katie considered this carefully. She had known this moment would come, when the young Vrexians realized they had changed in ways that might not fit their old world. "Vara, let me tell you something about being different. I grew up in a small town on Earth where everyone thought the same way, acted the same way. When I started asking questions and wanting more, people told me to settle down, to accept things as they were, but I could not. I had to leave to find a place where my differences were valued instead of punished. That is how I ended up here." "So you are saying we should leave our world?" Farah asked, her patterns flickering with confusion. "No," Katie said firmly. "I am saying you should go home and be exactly who you are. You have learned new things, gained new perspectives. That makes you valuable, not wrong. Your world needs Vrexians who have seen beyond their own culture, who can bridge the gap between your people and the galaxy. That is what your trial period was supposed to teach you, was it not?" Vera's patter. The day came faster than Katie wanted. Ambassador Krell informed her that the transport ship would arrive in 3 days to take the young Vrexians home. Their trial period was officially complete. They had not only passed but exceeded all expectations. Reports from other species on the station praised the young ones for their helpfulness, their discipline, and their remarkable ability to adapt to alien cultures. Katie felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. She had grown attached to the 4 young Vrexians in ways she had not expected. They were not just her students or her responsibility. They had become something like family, or the closest thing to family she had in this distant corner of space. 2 days before their departure, Krell requested Katie's presence at a private ceremony. The message was formal and official, with none of the warmth she had come to expect from the old ambassador. Katie dressed carefully in her best uniform and made her way to the cargo bay that the Vrexians had converted into a ceremonial space. She entered to find not just Krell and Drath, but a dozen adult Vrexians she had never seen before. They must have arrived on a separate transport, coming specifically for this event. Their patterns glowed in the dim lighting, creating a beautiful display of colors that pulsed in synchronized rhythm. The 4 young ones stood in the center of the space, their own patterns bright with nervous excitement. Krell stepped forward. His patterns shifted to a deep gold that Katie had learned meant respect and importance. "Katie Morrison, you have been called here to receive honor. The 4 young ones under your guidance have requested that we perform a ceremony rarely given to outsiders. They wish to formally acknowledge you as their pack leader and to grant you the marks of a Vrexian pack leader." Katie's breath caught. She had not expected this. She had thought maybe they would give her a small gift, a token of appreciation before they left. This was something far more significant. "What does that mean exactly?" Katie asked. "What obligations would this place on me?" Drath spoke, his rumbling voice filling the space. "It means you would be recognized across all Vrexian space as a pack leader. Any Vrexian who saw your marks would know you have earned the loyalty of pack members. It means these 4 young ones would consider you family for the rest of their lives. They would answer your call if you ever needed them. They would defend your honor as they would their own blood relatives. And what would I owe them in return? Katie asked because she had learned that in Vrexian culture all bonds went both ways. Only what you have already given, Krell said. Guidance when asked. Protection if they face threats they cannot handle alone. Recognition of their achievements and acknowledgement of their worth. You do not owe them daily attention or constant presence. The bond exists whether you are together or apart. It is a bond of spirit, not proximity. Katie looked at the 4 young Vrexians, Zek with his spiraling patterns, Vara with her geometric shapes, Thon with his gentle waves, Kira with her exploding stars. They had trusted her when they had no reason to. They had followed her lead when she barely knew where she was going. They had taught her as much as she had taught them. I accept, Katie said. I am honored to receive this recognition. The ceremony began. It was simpler than Katie expected, but more profound. Each of the 4 young ones approached her in turn. They pressed their foreheads to hers, a gesture that exposed the most vulnerable part of their body to another being. It was the ultimate sign of trust among their species. As each one touched her, Katie felt the warmth of their fur, smelled the strange earthy scent that all Vrexians carried, heard the low rumble of their breathing. Zek went first, his spirals spinning with joy. Then Vara, her geometric patterns perfectly aligned. Thon followed, his waves moving in perfect harmony. Finally, Kira pressed her forehead to Katie's, her starbursts exploding with pure happiness. When they finished, Krell approached with a small device that looked like a medical scanner. This will mark you, he said. It is painless but permanent. The mark will be invisible to human eyes but visible to Vrexian senses. We can see patterns of light that your species cannot. The mark will glow in those wavelengths, identifying you to any Vrexian who looks at you. Where does it go? Katie asked. Traditionally on the forehead where we placed our trust with you, but we can place it anywhere you choose. Many non-Vrexians prefer somewhere less visible. Katie thought about this. The mark would not show in human visible light, so placement did not matter much for appearances. But symbolism mattered. If she was going to be marked as a Vrexian pack leader, she might as well commit to it fully. The forehead is fine, Katie said. Krell passed the device over her forehead. Katie felt a brief tingling sensation and then nothing. The device beeped softly. Around her, all the Vrexians in the room reacted. Their patterns flared bright and then settled into what Katie recognized as deep respect. They could see something she could not, a mark that proclaimed her status in their culture. It is done, Krell said. His voice carried emotion that the translator could not fully capture. You are now formally recognized as a pack leader in Vrexian society. Your name will be recorded in our archives. Your mark will be registered with our central authority. You carry the honor of our people with you now. The ceremony ended, but the Vrexians did not leave. They surrounded Katie, not threateningly but warmly, and began to sing. It was one of the hunting songs the young ones had taught her, but this version was different. The words were changed, adapted. It was a song about a leader from another world who showed them a new way of being strong. It was a song about Katie. She listened with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the honor and the affection these alien predators were showing her. When the song ended, she thanked them in Vrexian, using the formal phrases Vara had taught her. The young ones practically glowed with pride. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Katie spent as much time with the 4 young Vrexians as possible. They shared meals, told stories, made plans to stay in contact through the galaxy's communication networks. Katie promised to visit their homeworld if she ever got the chance. They promised to return to the station someday, after they had established themselves as adults in their society. On the final day, Katie walked them to the docking bay where the transport ship waited. Other species on the station had come to see them off. Aliens that had once feared the Vrexians now waved goodbye with genuine warmth. The young ones had changed hearts and minds through their actions. At the airlock, Vera turned to Katie one last time. Her geometric patterns shifted through every color Katie had learned to recognize. Joy, sadness, respect, love, gratitude, all of it flowing across her fur in beautiful complexity. Thank you, Pack Leader Katie, Vera said. You taught us that being an apex predator is not about dominating others. It is about lifting them up with you. That is the human way. That is the way we will carry home to our people. Zek added. We will show our world that strength can be gentle, that power can protect instead of threaten, that leaders serve their pack instead of ruling over them. Thon said quietly. You changed how we see ourselves and how we see the galaxy. That is the greatest gift a teacher can give. Kira bounded forward and nearly knocked Katie over with an enthusiastic hug. Her starburst patterns exploded with affection. "We will make you proud, pack leader. We will be worthy of the honor you gave us." Katie hugged each of them, her arms barely reaching around their massive frames. "You already make me proud. You already are worthy. Now go home and show them what you have learned. Show them that the galaxy is not a scary place full of prey to be hunted. Show them it is a community to be joined." They boarded the transport ship. Katie stood at the viewing window and watched as it detached from the station and fired its engines. The ship grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Katie touched her forehead where the invisible mark lay, a permanent reminder of the bond she had formed with 4 young predators from another world. Captain Hayes approached her, his footsteps quiet on the deck. "That was remarkable what you did with them. Half the security team thought they would eat someone before the trial period ended. Instead, they became the best ambassadors their species ever sent us." "They were always good," Katie said. "They just needed someone to see past the claws and fangs to the people underneath. And they needed someone brave enough to eat first," Hayes said with a smile. Katie laughed. "That too, though I still cannot believe a lunch break turned into a cross-species pack bonding experience." Hayes looked out at the stars. "You know, 3 other predator species have requested you specifically as their cultural liaison now. Word has spread about what you accomplished with the Rexians. They all want to learn from the human who treats apex predators with respect instead of fear." Katie considered this. 3 months ago, she had been terrified of meeting her first alien species. Now she was apparently the go-to person for teaching predators how to function in a multi-species society. Life on the station was certainly never boring. "I will think about it," Katie said, "but maybe after a short vacation. Pack leading is exhausting." She returned to her quarters and pulled up her personal logs. She wanted to record everything while